was in New Zealand, I had this experience. Their idea of coming together with God was coming together in community with ancestors. So there was a room that they would gather in, and they called it dream space. And everybody would sleep in this room and be visited by ancestors, right? So I just kept getting kind of shaken awake in the night by my grandmother, but I couldn't hear, right? And let me show you. The shaman was on the trip, and you know, she sat by me on one of our little planes things, and she was like, you know, you're really holding a lot of generational hate, which was interesting, right? And I was like, okay. And then after this, like my grandma kept, well, let me backtrack. This was such a crazy coincidence of stories, but like when we got there, I crossed over the threshold into this room, and the chief was there. And before even seeing a person, I was like, the energy feels like the Dalai Lama.
Oh, wow.
So this man was 6 months out of the year with the Dalai Lama and 6 months out of the year with his tribe. So it was very much that energy. And as we entered, they greeted forehead to nose with a share of breath. And I get down, he goes, welcome home, friend. And I was like, oh, interesting, right? So, and it did feel like home to me. And my grandmother, it was the only time I'd ever felt that same energy that I felt. So anyway, I knew I was being awakened, and I reached out to this shaman and I said, you know, my grandmother's trying to speak to me and I can't hear her. I can see her, I can feel her, but I can't hear her. And she was like, all right. So we went to this presentation at another tribe, and I'm sitting there and I'm getting so sleepy, right? And I feel this tap on my shoulder, and the shaman says, come with me. So she takes me outside. She said, I was sitting there and I got so sleepy, and your grandma showed up. And she said, it's about your father. And I was like, different grandmother, right? Like, it's not his mom.
Okay.
So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I started seeing these images of my father in the hospital, all these tubes, which is probably what I'm going to experience, and all these tubes, and he didn't have his teeth, and he was dying. Right? And I knew that he was still struggling and hurting. And I could feel this energy going through my body, but I was just like almost in convulsion with this energy. Like, but I couldn't get it to move out, right? So she takes me over to this tree, which it was one of those trees that you could snuggle into the roots. Like it almost was like the roots wrapped around me. And y'all know I love the trees. So I was doing that very naturally. I got all inside this tree. And I had had this experience with the grandmothers of the tribe while I was there. And one of the grandmothers just appeared. And I don't know if she appeared. I don't know if she was literally there or not. I don't know. I didn't care. But she said, you're processing the hate, the generational hate from your father's lineage. She goes, send it down into the roots of the tree and let the earth transmute it into something different. And at that moment, it was able to go out and go down into the roots, and I was like a wet rag afterwards. And sure, my dad was dying. Right? Sure, I was dying. He was dying. He was not. Called back home, blah, blah, blah. They all checked on him, and he was not dying at that time. But it did send me down there to see him. And at that point, I was like, all right, like he had processed a lot of his actions, and it felt uncluttered to me. But even if you're living in a sewer, you're gonna like maybe sweep out all the poo, but you're probably not gonna have sunshine there. That's kind of what it felt like just like okay, like an indifference versus love, right? And I don't mean love in a like, oh, I want him to suffer. You know what I mean? Just like a love you would have for somebody you liked and cared about and respected. So
Is your
anyway,
mother still with him?
no,
No.
no. Yeah, so I think I'm getting ready to live that moment right now that I saw in those dreams. And
How long ago was that, those dreams in New Zealand?
that was about 6 years ago or something.
Okay.
It's funny. I usually get these images and I just need to start knowing that. And a lot of times it's like a 5 year out. And
Oh, really? Wow.
yeah, and I'll be like, okay, oh, there it is, right? But I feel disappointed sometimes because I think it's happening right now. Like
Okay.
it's so real. Like the teen thing. Like I saw his dad, I saw his dad, I saw his dad. And yeah, New Zealand was a cool experience and in a way different way than I thought that I was going to experience going there, right? Because I was
Oh,
speaking.
did you go there? Did you go? Oh, you were speaking? Okay.
And but then we were, and I was enticed into doing it because we were going to be spending 10 days with the Whaitah, which I'd never even heard of before. And if you go on the internet, you can't even find them.
Whaitah.
Yeah, you can't find them.
Good.
No, I mean, it's said that the Maori is the indigenous peoples of New Zealand, and the Whaitah claim to the stories of the Maori crossing the waters and coming in.
I don't know what the Maoris are.
Maoris are cannibals, right? They're very, yeah, they're very more violent. Like the Whaitah would be like the feeling of the Dalai Lama. Like literally, like the energy as we drove into that was like, you just wanted to go like this. You could almost feel like a bubble of energy as we moved in there. Now it was beautiful, their structure, their governmental structure, right? They had a panel of men. Right?
Get a what?
A panel of men. I didn't want to wear this, but I will. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. A panel of men, like the tribal chiefs, because there's one big chief and then there were small little tribes, just kind of like our government and president, right? And those tribal leaders, like if they came up with a law or a choice or a decision, it had to be approved through the tribunal of women, which they called the grandmothers.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So the grandmothers got final say always.
Okay.
Right? Because they believe that the woman thinks of the all while the man thinks of the directive.
Okay.
It's true. And that's what's missing in our world is the woman thinking about the all while the man's thinking about the directive and then working together. Now, I witnessed that in action because one of the women was traveling with this little pouch of ashes of her father. And everybody was so psychic that they knew that. And they did not like it. Like, it was like, that's so disrespectful to be carrying around this man's ashes like that. Like, they need to be buried and honored and celebrated and allowed to become back in the cycle of life. So to remedy it, the main guy was like, well, let's honor him with a burial, right? And these other tribal leaders were like, no. Like, no. We're not putting him in our ground. He's not ours. Right?
Makes sense.
So that became the thing, and the tribunal, it was sent through the grandmothers, and the grandmothers agreed to allow to have this man buried so that she could resume her thing there. He could be honored. Everybody would be. And every night they would come together in what they called a talk circle. So they would come together, and this guy stood up and he was hot. You know, he goes, but this is our way. You know, I mean, he stated all of his reasons why. He said, you know, we honor our dead, never go in any room head first. They're always feet first. They're always in a position of power. They're, you know, so this is so degrading, right? Like he said it all. But he said, but we honor the grandmother's word. So I was very drawn to them. And our Western way, right? I'm sitting at the table with them and I'm like, so, like, how do you become a grandmother? And they were like, I don't know. And I'm like, so is there a criteria? Like, did you get chosen? Did you, like, I don't know. There's that. You know what I mean? Like, they just were.
That's probably just the example of a perfect society.
Yeah, you know, and they had their troubles. Like they did. Like one girl had been trafficked, right? You know, so they had their troubles, but it was really beautiful. Like you know, here's this chief, Dalai Lama status chief, standing up speaking with this little boy walking around with this stick winding in between his legs, climbing on everybody in the audience. Everybody, he instead of being reprimanded, it was a celebration of this child. He'd pick him up, he'd hold him, this big belly laugh. Yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Awesome.
I kind of
That's where you saw that big
the tree
that was like 4,000 years old.
Yeah, he took us there.
At the Tree of Life.
That tree was the example of community to me. As were they, right? You know, as were they. And such a respect in that greeting, right? And really from that space, and you think about like what people knew way back when, but that exchange of molecules, in that exchange of breath really does make me you and you me. Plus the mind meld, right?
Is that why they greet you there and here?
It's here, like here with an exchange of breath.
Okay.
Right? And like we went through this one ceremony going to this other tribe right prior to me having that experience. One of the grandmothers, as we were going through this line, now there were like 40 of us. So, you know, to go through this line was quite a process, you know, through the elders of their tribe. So I'm going through, and one of the grandmothers holds me in that position for like 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Like 20 minutes. Like literally, everyone is seated. Everyone is annoyed at me. Like everybody.
Why are they annoyed?
You know, I still don't quite know. I was there, and she was like, you were holding up the line. I was like, well, was I? I said, would it have not been rude for me to like say, excuse me, when she was holding me in that place? Because there were a couple times where I was like feeling that pressure and kind of started to lift, and she pulled me back. And I was like, I'm just standing here until she's done, right? So the chief of the tribe followed me later, and he said, you made quite an impression on my daughter. Still, like, I'm like not knowing. I mean, even now, I don't know what that was about, but made quite an impression on my daughter. And I was like, oh, how? Right? Why? And he just smiled and walked on.